Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another StefTalks webinar. Today, we'll be talking to both Leo and Matt. I'll have them introduce themselves in a little bit, but we're talking about today applying digital thinking for a better manufacturing performance. I know they have a great presentation prepared. If you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and drop them in the question box on your screen, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. And we also are recording this session. So if you have to run out or you come in late, we will be sending out a recording to this and some main takeaways that we want you to remember from what we talk about today. So Matt and Leo, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, Amy, thank you. So I'm Leo Vieira. Good morning, everybody. I'm the director of the area that we call digital industry. I'm a mechatronics engineer, so have applied technology on a manufacturing space a while. So Matt, what about you?
Yeah, no, thanks, Leo. So my name is Matt Cunningham. I'm fairly new to the Stefanini team. I just joined a couple months ago, but I've been in the technology space for the last 8 years or so with a focus on digital transformation, really now more Industry 4.0 solutions. So Leo, really appreciate you including me in this conversation. I think now more than ever, this topic it's so relevant with everything that's happening in the world today. And, it's really hard to predict the future. It's even harder to predict the future now. I think there's more uncertainty about what's to come, more than ever. And so I think it's so important for companies to embrace a digital transformation mindset, to embrace an agile approach to when implementing solutions. And, I think that COVID, when you think about it, when COVID hit, you had companies, not just manufacturing companies, but all companies had to get their workforce up and running remotely within weeks and even days in some cases. You had manufacturers that had to totally pivot full-blown production lines to stop producing what they normally would produce, but to help with with COVID relief, manufacturing masks and gowns and ventilators. And so those companies had to be agile. They had to quickly pivot. And I think as a result, you're seeing companies that haven't embraced it become more exposed. And it's challenging for companies. I think some companies, not every company, obviously, but I think there's a challenge when you think about how do you go about implementing a digital transformation solutions. There's a lot of questions. Will I get a return on my investment? How long is this going to take? And a lot of times that just screams money and that it's going to be costly. And that's not necessarily always the case. And I think, that these are some of the topics that Leo and I will touch on today are really what are the barriers that we're seeing and how can you kind of break that mold and really come out of this with more of a digital mindset. So with that being said, why don't you go ahead, Leo, and get us started.
Yeah, and actually, so the barriers that you're mentioning, actually, I'm using that metaphor to kind of divide our topics nowadays, right? So let's see the first wall. The first wall that we see that is changing from the traditional to the current situation that we have, right? So first of them is actually how the technology is acquired in a common sense, right? So if you see the standard model of having a RFP and then the providers put a proposal and then a decision is made based on that selection. So some companies have different process, but they have the same modus operandi there, and then you have the contract subject delivered at the end. And then if you see the RFP, back in 15, 20 years ago, the technical specifications used to be a very detailed document, right? With all the limitations, all the objectives, and squaring a little bit in a high level, in a very high level of detail, what is being purchased, right? So what is being intended by the customer, right? So then you have the proposal where the providers should put a scope limitation, make some assumptions, and based on the interpretation that they have on the technical specification, so they have a risk associated with that delivery and the price, right, at the end of the day. So that leads us to the real world, where you have scope changes, you have the expectation management from the two parts, right, the vendor and the customer, and try to align that high risk realization, right, because as you predicted first, you have seen that. So the process of having that, as the time comes, we see specifications with less detail, so it's less specific, which brings more design to the proposal. And the proposal is still, outside of the project as well. And then what we can have there is, in most of the cases, more frustration because of all those environment, right? So do you agree with that? Do you see any comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, especially when it comes to digital transformation solutions, right? I mean, when RFPs become so broad and when there really aren't as many details, you're going to lose a lot of that, the personal touch and the uniqueness that each vendor can bring to these types of responses. When they're broad and generic, you're going to get a lot of the same responses, and you're not going to really be able to differentiate when you're reviewing these proposals, and therefore you're going to kind of create a bias when you go to make a selection. It's going to be very easy to gravitate towards those brand name companies just because of how generic they are. So no, absolutely, I agree with you that this is a different approach. This is an approach that needs to be handled differently, I think, when it comes to these types of solutions.
Yeah, and I really call that as a digital thinking killer, right? Because as soon as you sign the contract, you're kind of signing a wedding certificate, right? So you're marrying with that, scope, and you never had the opportunity to change it, right? So let me give you an example that we see in one of our customers. It is a very simple representation of that. So imagine a production line, and we have 3 quality checks, right? The first one is the weight. The other one is to check if there's a metal inside of the bag, and then if the bag is damaged some way, right? So every time the system detects an abnormality, so some of those quality checks is turned on, the line stops, right? Then what we have is a guy going and taking the damaged bag out of the line and then putting the line to work again, right? So the request was to build a similar line because they wanted to double the production by the end of the day. But when we saw this in the field, so we could present a proposal to double the line, but when we saw the problem, we saw that the solution could be even simpler, right? Because of that quality check feature, the line was working lower than 50%. So what we proposed actually was an automatic, rejection. We made, this robot to make the selection, to really separate the bad, the bad product from the good product, and then we have somebody goes there and check if the products it really need an attention or not, right? So, but we reach that without putting any new element to the line or any new investment. In this case, just adding more, intelligence for the line, right? So that's, as we want to, discuss a little bit about digital thinking. That could be a good, simple example that people could relate and see. It's different. So if you comparing the request with what we really, at the end of the day, what we really deliver, right?
Right. And imagine this RFP. This would be an RFP that we probably wouldn't be able to respond to if this is how they had wrote it, right? If they wrote it as a production issue and they needed a whole new or were looking for an entirely new production line, that wouldn't be us. That would have been a different partner or a different vendor. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a production issue. It was an uptime issue, and it was a human interaction thing. And so just coming with that digital thinking, that digital approach, save them money and save them time. So no, really cool example. I love this.
So, and then when you think on digitalization, right? So to make things more digital at your operation, so we always consider a current state, right? Because people are looking for, in this new area of Industry 4.0. So everybody, in some sense, they think it's a matter of bringing robots and bringing things, but you always have to consider the starting point, right? So the starting point, and then the desired stage you want to reach, right? So this will give you, without thinking about technologies, it's just thinking about the business, where you are and where you want to be in the future. So you will be always looking for or higher efficiency or lower cost or better quality or more safety or bigger market share. It never, the desire stage won't be, I want to be more robotized, I want to be more, predictive and those kind of things, right? So this is the way we tackle at the first time. So tell me where your pains are, so we can go over that, right? So, and then we go to a very, primary and fundamental thing, which is tell me the problem, right? So because by knowing the problem, you have 50% of the solution in place, right? So a problem needs to be very well stated in a way we can, relate the solution and bring the solution with that case. So our approach for that is to use design thinking, because it's the more open and more prepared methodology to deal with, complexity, to deal with the focus on people. Meaning, for example, even if it is a field operator, somebody that is in the plant, I still need to think about his interaction with the machine. At the end of the day, this is gonna bring more benefits to that, and it's agile, right? So this is how we tackle that. So this gives us the first step in the journey, right? So the design thinking with the domain knowledge will help us with the first step, which is establish the vision, based on the business objective, right? So where do you want to go, and the current stage that you really have, right?
Right. No, Leon, I think that's important. What you said is, focusing on the people aspect, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the employees that are going to be interacting with this technology day in and day out. That's going to be the important piece, and that's going to help with adoption as well. And then when you talk about the discovery journey, it's so important to understand the current state. Where are you currently? And then you can build that vision around that current state with the objectives and understanding how to get to that desired state. So
yeah. So, and then talking about this first wall, it's how we tackle technology. So we understand that we should assume or should be in a place of a technology partner before we go into and understand the problem. So to resolve the problem is part of the process. Okay. And then I think the second wall is, again, the traditional way is to have long-term plans, right? So you establish a 5-year plan, and then we have yearly executing that. I wouldn't say blindly, but so there was not much disturbance from the external world or from the internal environment to make you change your plan so often, right? So in that time, so you deal with a longer term. So now what do we see? It's people replacing that longer term plan to what we call long-term vision, right? And with the long-term vision, you have then short actions and short-term actions and short-term results, right? So that leads us to it's a kind of understand that the companies are more affected by the external environment, and they need to react fast. So it's a waste of energy to think a lot, beyond 2-3 years, because it's really a guess plans, right? So it's just a game of imagination, right? So you just have to imagine without any
right.
tangible.
I love the analogy you used, Leo, when we were talking offline separately. It's like driving a vehicle, down a long road, and if you get off just a little bit, you can correct that without having a long-term impact on the entire trip itself.
Yeah.
These short-term actions allow companies to be agile. It allows them to pivot based on circumstances that they can't necessarily control, such as the circumstance we're currently in with COVID. So no, well said. I think that's very important. You always want to have a long-term goal or vision, but take small pieces. Don't try and take the full chunk, because there will be mistakes that are made. And if you take shorter actions, smaller chunks, those mistakes won't be as large.
Yeah. And just to not be so subject, let's say, let's get one of the examples that we are right now working on, right? So we started with a customer that was, looking to create a kind of digital model or digital plant model for one such operation, right? And then so one of the main things around this digitalization was, what is the goal? What I want to have at the end of the day with this digital plant, right? And then we got 10% more productivity as the goal, right? So as an approach, after being selected as the digital partner, we started to work in which kind of initiatives we should be looking for to reach that 10%. We saw that we need to care about the plant reliability. So bring the plant to a more stable way. We saw another aspect was the production optimization, to bring more efficient with the line production, and improve the field operator efficiency. Here is where, as I mentioned before, is where we are bringing new techniques, or let's say more digital techniques, to the manufacturing space. So we are applying user experience, which is a term used in the IT world, to the shop floor, right? So it's really to increase the interaction of the operator with the machine that he's dealing with, right? So, and then we had some technology areas, right? So then at this point, we start to really deal with the legacy systems and all the improvements or new additions that we could do to reach those strategic initiatives, right? So if you see, we are along the route, we define, hey, this need more automation, this need more attention on analytics and those kind of things.
Right.
And the project itself was delivered gradually. The results was gradually delivered through an agile team and being measured by sprints, and being the results being measured by sprints. So that's the way we tackle that, and we kind of created a second step of our journey, which is our digital roadmap, which is really giving us a sense of map, because fed by the vision, the objectives, you have all the detail around that vision, but it's a instant picture, right? So
Right.
I would to make a parallel with that, with a dark cave. You have just one light, and going into the cave, so you can prepare yourself as much as you can, plan, or to have food, to have water, or whatever. But you see the cave, what you have inside the cave as you go walk. That's why we say, the digital roadmap is something living that needs to be updated every cycle, every interaction, right?
Yep. I love the cave analogy. You never know what's going to be in there until you get there. And
yeah, and again, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the digital roadmap is kind of like that. It allows you to kind of creep along with those short steps that we mentioned, but you can measure each step that you're taking. And so therefore it goes back to the impact, right? Like I said, mistakes will be made, and the impacts of those mistakes aren't going to be as large. And you can actually catch those mistakes because of the analyzation, the measurements, and everything that you're taking along the way in these short sprints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I love that.
And so let's take the manufacturing space. They have standards, right? So the ISA 95, it is a way to organize the information inside the plant, right? So you have the sensors, instruments, the PLC, SCADA, the management system, which is the manufacturing execution system, and then the ERP. So it is what was defined kind of 20, 25 years ago. And then if you see QHint, or even the definition that the standard has nowadays, it doesn't change much, right? So you still see some examples. It is still being built in layers, right? And then again, it's for me, it sounds like a combustion engine, right? So it's the same thing since 150 years ago,
Right.
and people just putting so working in the effectiveness of that, but actually, so the electrical engine is just recently is being used in some case, but the combustion engine is the principles is still there, right? So it's still a node thing that is just being managed.
Yeah.
So and then this kind of a standard, again, that is nothing against the standard, but the standard creates some behaviors at the end of the day. So the way the standards see the information inside the plant it's the way people plan to invest, right? So most of the customers believe that they need, first of all, before they have any, digital solution, they have to have, basic level. The issue is that because this is a very intensive financially process, right? So you have to have cash flow to invest this way, right?
Yeah, right.
And then actually, when we see the benefits are realized in this direction. So there is a 90-degree disconnection between how the money is spent and how the benefits are perceived. So the first thing that we have to do is to line up that benefit again with the benefit, with the investment that we have, and then we have a growing, how can I say, a more healthy growing plan around that route, right?
Right. And I think this could even go under the first wall, the first barrier that we talked about, right? Is how technology is being acquired. It's being acquired at a level by level basis. They're investing almost one at a time. And if you go about it that way, things are still going to be isolated. Things are still going to be operating in silos. It's hard to understand how one investment may impact your ERP system, or how are the sensors going to integrate with the right systems, right? So it's really, you have to go about it at more of a holistic approach. These solutions, the example that you gave, about the plant, and I think we'll even get into it a little bit more, it wasn't just at the plant level that we're implementing technology. Those technologies are actually touching all the business units within the organization at some point or another, whether it's grabbing data from a certain system, pushing data, integrations, all of that has to be realized before you can truly realize the value of these types of technology solutions. So
yeah,
I think that's important, making sure that you have a holistic, full 360-degree view of the implementation, really, and how it's going to impact the organization as a whole.
Yeah, and then bringing more money to the table to invest in the next round, right? So that's a circle that needs to be respected. Right?
Yep.
So and then we can talk a little bit about how the technology is being implemented, right? So we have been seeing customers changing mindset and not thinking in that horizontal layers, and really thinking about the areas that that solution is gonna impact, right? So for example, here you have an example from one customer that was this is a project portfolio, and the areas of benefit for each one, right? So the color is the area, the size of the bubble is the ROI. So it's a very important information for you to decide.
Yep.
And then the way it is put on quadrants is because we separate projects that are, that has low level of uncertainty and low level of complexity, and the opposite with high level of both of them. So, which means you have different approaches depending on the type of project that you have, right? So, and the approach could be related with the data maturity that you have in your plant, right? So we can talk about that in a minute, right? And then, so how we see the data maturity is really, hey, you cannot automate something that you not even measure, right? So if you want to turn a manual job a predictive thing, you have a journey to pass through, as I said, it's hard work. It's not, magic. You have to understand what is your need of your plant, what is your decision points that you have to make, and then taking decisions on what you will invest as prescriptive, right? So just to be clear, I don't know, Matt, if you have all those in mind, but for example, descriptive is kind of measure, is to understand what it is.
Right.
Analytic is really monitor, is really understand the behavior, right? By understanding the behavior, you can have patterns. By having patterns, you can automate, right? So having that automate. So by having all those things, you can establish a historical behavior, and then you can plan for predictions, right? And having predictions, you can prepare yourself to take automated actions based on the prediction that you did, right? So kind of hey, I'm a furnace and I see my temperature going up very quickly. So I can see that by the end of the day, my temperature will be very high. So your prescriptive action would be to try to lower that down and try to control the infeeds that you have in the furnace. Right? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yeah, and I think that's why it's so important for organizations to understand their current state and then to have that vision, right? It makes this process a little less intimidating, right? Because if you, even just by what you said, it might seem intimidating and it might seem like a long road. But in reality, if you have the vision and if you're continuously monitoring or analyzing throughout the process, this becomes a little easier.
Yeah, and again, you don't need to make everything in a plant prescriptive. You have to start with this, critical points. That's so important. It's very important as well. Good. So let's make that tangible, right? So imagine this challenge that we had. So an industrial facility that has 1,200 trucks per day with 80 loading stations. So this is more or less 1 truck per minute at the gate, right? So the idea here is to make this process digital. So how can I do something digital that depends on a human, right? So which is the truck driver. You have 1,200 truck drivers, behaving inside a system that you want to control, right? So the key factor was really bringing the right truck to the right loading station at the right time, so to really meet all those customers' orders at the right moment. Right?
Yep. Got to get the trucks in and got to get them out.
Yeah, in a very efficient way. So our first thought was to, bring inspiration to the table and compare with something. So the closest phenomenon that we find was the airport, right? Because you have people in and out from different gates. They have different objectives, but we have a schedule. You have a real-time schedule changing every time. You have, how can I say, qualified and classified waiting rooms that people just go there if they are, really prepared for that, if they have the paperwork and everything. And at the end of the day, the loading station is like the boarding gate, right? It's really how we foresee that. And over the process, we brought that idea as a concept, and then the concept was taking form and getting detail and getting a specification, so technical specifications up to the real world application.
I love this. I love how you guys used a real world example from a totally different industry that had nothing to do with trucking.
Yeah.
You were able to apply it, and that made it tangible for them, right? In their minds. Yeah, I love this.
Yeah, because you can take a lot of, you can anticipate a lot of problems by looking at an existing example, right? For example, what happens if a passenger get delayed for a flight, right? So we address that. So what happens if a truck driver delays? So you can imagine that the load station be busy for this guy and waiting for this guy. So everything was kind of designed to prepare for those issues. And it really has a real-time planning and scheduling system taking care of that. And then, oh, sorry, let me go back. And then you see the project from each stage, right? So you see the sensors opening the gates, and real-time information showing to the truck driver to help him decide which way to go. So it's like really in an airport, showing you, you should go here, you should go there, and those kind of things. So it's very, very interesting to see the real application working like that.
And I think something that we had mentioned earlier is so key here is putting the end user in mind, right? Sitting in their seat. And so while we implemented this for that said company, that company wasn't necessarily the end user. It was all of their, their third party truck vendors and those truck drivers, right? So those were the ones that were actually going to utilize that technology. And in their minds, they were benefiting from the technology because they could get in and get out quicker and more efficiently. Mm-hmm. But the customer's obviously benefiting by expediting that process as well. But you had to put the trucker hat on for that mm-hmm. one. That was, I think, very key.
Yeah, and another element that I forgot to mention is that the customer didn't buy layers. So he bought for the business objective, right? So I want to be able to handle 1,200 trucks per day. And I want you guys to resolve that. So to give an idea, our supply, we as suppliers, we provide even the fiber optics up to the optimization system, going interface with SAP and everything. So the approach was really transversional, was really going through all those layers and making the changes and adaptations that was needed to that specific purpose. Right?
He had a clear problem statement or challenge statement in this case. And
yeah,
it seemed like they didn't care how we went about it.
Yeah, it was a very business-oriented case, and the good thing was the technology was not there yet. So most of the technology we have been co-creating with them, as we usually do in our company. So we co-create solutions, right? So some of those things were co-created, specific for that problem. So, and then this brings us to how we execute the roadmap, right? So, because I don't know if you had the impression, but those two previous steps give us the impression that we are doing some kind of consultancy job. And if it is a question, yes, we do consultant job, but to be able to really deliver the solutions, the technology solution after that, right? But the consultancy is, I would say, is different. We do in a different way because what we have in the roadmap is really how the things can be delivered. And it doesn't matter if us doing that or if we're going to bring a partner, or we have cases, for example, that we suggest the customer to buy from some kind of other technology or some kind of other vendor to complement that solution at the end of the day, right? So, and then talking about the approach, I mean, as the uncertainty grows, as the problem becomes more uncertain, we have ways to approach the problem, not only PMI related type of methodology, but for example, if it is low complexity and a little bit uncertain, I just put an MVP type of delivery, like a lean delivery, and then we can work for that. Or if it is something very uncertain or very complex, for example, something that is never being applied in that industry or is a new technology, we apply design thinking to really kind of validate the hypothesis and bring the solution more, how can I say, boxed and square. Then, of course, as you validate the hypothesis, you can scale that up, right? So you can go to other line or other plants and go in applying the same solution over that. The good point here is that it doesn't mean we only look for the short term, right? As we mentioned in the beginning, we care about the long-term vision. Then you have to have some expectations along the road for the long term as well, right? And again, everything is connected with the business objectives or business areas that you guys that the customer could have at the end of the day. Right? Yep. Does that make sense for you?
It does. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think from the last slide that you showed, again, going back to the short steps and the short, and just analyzing through that execution, it'll allow you to scale easier and quicker because you've already proven that concept, you already know it works, and therefore the adoption internally will be better. So I think, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, definition and creation effort is different from application. That's the point. And then what is very important is just to conclude that topic, Matt. As we have discussing at the beginning, the roadmap is dynamic, and how we make them dynamic is getting feedback from the previous process.
Yep.
And every cycle, you can have a new technology, the customer can have a new competitor. We can have a COVID-like situation, right? So everything needs to be reviewed and
got to be ready to pivot. Got to be ready to pivot.
Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a very brief overview on how we do and how we can help. This is really a representation of how we can help in that journey. So I hope you guys like, and Amy, if you have any questions, maybe we can answer them.
Yeah, and I think also before we get into the questions, I think it's important to know, Stefanini in general, it doesn't matter where you are within this process, we can help at every stage or phase of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And, go and talk to people, go and talk to companies like Stefanini, leverage not only the domain knowledge and experience that someone like Stefanini can bring to the table, but we also have the industry knowledge as well. We're working with these types of customers and we're talking to these types of folks every single day. So we really do understand the challenges. And, like we said in the beginning, it can seem like a big undertaking, but at the end of the day, it's really not, and it really can improve your organization as a whole. So thank you, Leo. No, I think this was a great presentation, and hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you to both of you. I think we have time for at least one more question. So this question is, how do I get started with applying design thinking to operations if I've never done so before?
Leo, go ahead, take a crack.
Yeah, I can guide. So actually, the design thinking for us is a tool, right? So it's the way for us to approach. So really the way to start is really engage on the business objective. And then we have, even in this COVID situation, we have a process that now is virtual to help you guys design those first stages before going to the plants and implement any kind of technological solution.
And talk to the users, right? The people that are going to be using this technology and that would ultimately, hopefully, benefit from this technology. Make sure that you're talking to those business unit leaders and collaborating with them, because those are the folks that are actually going to benefit and are going to be working alongside. So when you're in that design thinking, put yourself in their shoes. I think that's also helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So is that it, Amy?
I have one more.
All right. Awesome.
Why should manufacturing take part in the digital disruption?
I should it?
Yes.
Leo, go ahead.
Yeah, Amy, can you repeat that, please? You're breaking up a little bit.
Sure. Why should manufacturing take part in the digital disruption?
Why? It's because a matter of survival. Because the marketing is changing. The customer are becoming more. How can I say more? They are looking for more customizations, right? So we are seeing massive manufacturing places transforming themselves for what we call batch of one, right? So one customized product that was built for Matt, for example, that is the different from the product that is produced for me. So it is more and more a need to be digital, because you have to turn your plant in a flexible and more efficient plant because of those times, those changes that we are seeing. Right?
Couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Well, that is all that we have time for today. Thank you again, Matt and Leo, for taking your time out of your day to talk to us for this webinar. And like I mentioned earlier, we did record this session, so we will be sending out a link to the recording later today into your inboxes. Thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Matt. Good partner. Thank you.